The stars above the quiet human colony flickered against the endless dark, a reminder that even in this far corner of the galaxy, fate had ways of weaving stories no one could predict. The human settlement was small, built with modest homes and wide stretches of farmland that stretched into the horizon. People here valued hard work, fairness, and survival more than politics or wars that raged across planets. It was a quiet life, one that seemed untouched by the larger conflicts of the galaxy. Until one night, when a punishment from a distant, alien world would change everything for one man. She was brought in silence, a young alien girl, not more than in her early years of womanhood, walked with shackles on her wrists and shame in her eyes. Her people, known for their pride in strict laws, believed that disgrace should be washed away not through mercy, but through humiliation. For disobeying her leaders and speaking against a judgment, she had been sentenced to the lowest fate possible, given as a slave to a human, a race many of her people considered beneath them. To her, this was worse than death. The humans had not asked for her. The arrangement had been political, an agreement between her people and the colony's council, a message of peace wrapped in cruelty, meant to show that even a daughter of the alien world could be humbled by living under human hands. And so, one evening, she was left at the doorstep of a man's home. He was an ordinary farmer, a man who lived alone. After the war had taken his family, his days were quiet, his hands worn from tilling the soil, his heart heavy with silence. When the council told him he would be given a gift, he had not expected a living being. He stared at her as she stood at his door, chains clinking. Softly, her eyes full of fire even though her lips said nothing. "You belong here now," the soldier escorting her said before turning away. The man did not answer at first. He only looked at her, then at the chains, then back into her guarded eyes. He could see the hatred there, the shame, the silent vow that she would never bow. For a moment, he thought of sending her away, but he also knew she had nowhere to go. If he left her outside, the night would swallow her, and his conscience would never allow it. "Come inside," he finally said. The words surprised her. She had expected harshness, maybe mockery, maybe even cruelty, but instead, his voice was steady, almost reluctant. She stepped into the small wooden house, her eyes scanning the simplicity around her. A single table, 2 chairs, shelves filled with tools and books, a bed tucked in the corner. Nothing grand, nothing cruel, just a place for one person to live. He gave her water, then food. She hesitated, glaring at the plate as though it was poison. But her hunger betrayed her. Slowly, with trembling fingers, she ate. He did not speak, only sat across the table and watched. In his silence, there was no judgment, no satisfaction, only patience. Days passed. She did not speak to him, and he did not force her to. She worked, as expected, carrying water, tending the garden, cleaning the house. At first, she did these tasks with sharp movements, as though proving to herself that she was not broken. But as the days grew into weeks, she began to notice small things: how he never once raised his hand against her, how he never mocked her accent when she struggled with his language, how he left food for her even when he ate little himself. One night, as she sat by the window staring at the stars, she whispered to herself in her tongue, a question only meant for the silence. "Why does he not treat me as a slave?" He heard her, though he did not answer. His heart, wounded by years of loss, had no desire for power over another. He had only wanted peace, and though she was brought to him as a punishment, he could not bring himself to treat her as anything less than human. And so, in that quiet house on the edge of the colony, two strangers began to share a life neither of them had chosen. A girl punished by her people, and a man punished by fate, bound together not by chains but by the slow, unseen threads of something that neither could yet name. The mornings in the colony were quiet, broken only by the calls of strange birds and the soft hum of farming machines in the distance. For the alien girl, each dawn was a reminder that she was far from her own world, a place where she had once walked freely among her people. Now she woke in a stranger's house, the scent of soil and wood heavy in the air, her heart caught between defiance and confusion. At first, she had thought he would eventually reveal his cruelty, that all his silence and patience were just a disguise for domination. But as the days unfolded, she began to notice the details that unsettled her heart. He would rise before the sun, work the land with his calloused hands, and return to share a meal with her without uttering demands. He left her space, never entering the corner she had chosen for herself, never forcing her into conversation. It was as if he treated her not as a slave, but as a guest who had not yet decided to stay or still. She carried her anger like armor. Every time she fetched water from the well or prepared the fire, she reminded herself that this life had been forced upon her. She told herself she owed him nothing. Yet, there was a moment small but sharp that planted doubt in her chest. One afternoon, while gathering wood from the edge of the field, her foot slipped on loose soil, and she fell hard, twisting her ankle. Pain shot through her leg, and she cried out despite her pride. He came running, dropping the tool in his hand, his face tight with concern. Without hesitation, he lifted her up. Strong arms steady beneath her light frame, she struggled against him, insisting she could walk, but the pain betrayed her. "Be still," he said firmly, carrying her back inside. For the first time, she saw something in his eyes that shook her, a mixture of worry and gentleness. He set her down on the bed, fetched clean cloth, and began to wrap her ankle with careful hands. She wanted to protest, to spit out words of defiance, but the warmth of his touch and the quiet patience in his movements silenced her. He did not look at her as a master looks at a servant. He looked at her as one human might look at another in need. That night, unable to sleep, she watched him as he sat near the fire, reading from a worn book. His face was lined with years of hardship, but his eyes carried a depth she had not noticed before. He had known pain, to that much was clear. She wondered what story lived behind his silence. What loss had carved those lines on his face? The next morning, when he placed a bowl of warm broth before her, she surprised herself by whispering, "Thank you." The word hung in the air between them. It was the first time she had spoken directly to him since her arrival. He glanced at her, startled, then gave a small nod, as though he understood the weight behind those two simple words. From that day, something began to shift. She no longer avoided his presence. Sometimes when he worked in the fields, she would sit nearby, pretending to busy herself with small tasks, but secretly watching him. Other times, when he returned home weary, she would quietly place water before him without being asked. These were small gestures, almost invisible, but they were the beginning of something neither of them could deny. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of orange and red, he spoke to her for the first time about himself. He told her how he once had a wife, how sickness had taken her before they could have children, how the war that followed had left him with nothing but land and memories. His voice was quiet, steady, but beneath the calmness she could hear the ache. She listened without interrupting. For the first time, she saw him not as a stranger or captor, but as a man who had suffered in his own way. She felt an unfamiliar pull in her chest, a soft stirring that frightened her more than chains ever could. When he finished, he looked at her as though expecting nothing in return, but she found herself whispering, almost against her will, "My punishment was meant to break me, yet here, I do not feel broken." He did not answer, but the way his eyes softened told her he understood. That night, the silence between them no longer felt like distance. It felt like a bridge being built, one stone at a time, across the gulf of pain and pride that had once separated them. The storm they feared finally arrived. It began with murmurs, then grew into open disapproval. Neighbors avoided them in the market, council members whispered behind closed doors, and finally, an official summons was delivered to the farmhouse. The letter was sealed with the colony's crest. Its words were sharp, leaving no room for misunderstanding. "You are to appear before the council at dawn. Matters concerning the alien girl and your conduct must be addressed." She read the message with trembling hands. Her chest tightened. With dread. "They mean to take me," she whispered. He took the paper from her, his face calm but his jaw set. "They will not." That night, neither of them slept. She sat by the window, staring at the endless stars that once gave her comfort. He sharpened his tools quietly, though they both knew weapons would not win against politics. Still, The gesture showed his resolve he would fight in whatever way he could. At dawn, the square filled with people. The council sat at their raised seats, their faces grave. She stood beside him, her head held high though fear churned in her stomach. The elder counselor spoke first. This girl was given as punishment, not as privilege, yet she lives as though she were your equal. This is not what was agreed. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some nodded in approval. Others shifted uncomfortably. She felt every eye on her, piercing like blades. He stepped forward, his voice steady but strong. You speak of agreements, of punishments, but she is not a punishment. She is a person. I will not degrade her for the sake of appearances. Gasps echoed. One counselor slammed his hand on the table. You forget your place, farmer. The peace between our people was fragile. Her humiliation was part of the price. If you dishonor that, you risk undoing everything. She clenched her fists. For so long, she had carried the weight of shame, of being forced into chains. But in that moment, hearing them speak of her as though she were less than human, fire sparked inside her. She took a step forward. You speak of peace, she said, her voice trembling at first but growing stronger. But what peace is built on cruelty? You sent me here to be broken. Yet instead, I found someone who saw me as more than chains. If that is your version of dishonor, then I welcome it. The square fell silent. The crowd stared at her in shock, some with awe, others with outrage. The council erupted in protests. She dares speak. She should remember her place. This is rebellion. But he raised his hand, silencing them with sheer presence. His voice cut through the noise. If rebellion means treating her with dignity, then yes, I rebel. The counselors exchanged furious looks. You leave us no choice, the elder said coldly. She will be removed from your home and returned to her people, where true punishment will be carried out. And you, he pointed a finger at him, will answer for defying the council's authority. A heavy weight fell on the crowd. Whispers turned to shouts. People divided in their judgment. Some called for obedience, others murmured that the council had gone too far. That she felt the blood drain from her face. The thought of being torn away, dragged back to her world where harsher punishment awaited, was unbearable. But before panic could overwhelm her, he stepped closer, placing himself between her and the council. You will not take her, he said firmly. If you want her gone, you will have to take me to. His words struck the square like thunder. Gasps filled the air. She stared at him, her heart pounding, her breath caught in her chest. He had not only defended her, he had tied his fate to hers completely. The council hesitated. Their authority had never been so openly challenged, not by a simple farmer. The crowd shifted restlessly, murmuring louder, some voices rising in support of him, others demanding punishment. For the first time, she saw cracks in the council's control. Fear flickered in their eyes, not of her, but of the people, because if too many sided with him, their power would weaken. The elder banged his staff against the floor. Enough, this matter is not finished. You both will remain under watch until a final decision is made. Guards stepped forward, but did not seize them. The crowd was too restless, and the council knew that forcing the matter now might spark a riot. He placed his arm gently at her back, guiding her away from the square. She walked beside him, her heart heavy yet full of something stronger than fear. For the first time, she realized that what bound them now was not just kindness, not just safety, it was love. Raw, undeniable. That evening, as they sat by the fire in silence, she finally whispered, "You risked everything for me." He looked at her, his eyes soft yet unyielding. It wasn't a risk, it was the only choice. Her breath shook. She reached for his hand, and this time he did not hesitate. Their fingers intertwined, fragile yet unbreakable. The storm had broken open, and they both knew it. The colony, the council, even her own people, they would come. But no matter what lay ahead, they would face it together, no longer as prisoner and farmer, but as something far greater. The days that followed were unlike any they had known. The council had not forgotten nor forgiven, and guards now lingered near the edges of the fields, watching. The air was thick with tension. Every step outside the house carried risk. Every glance from a neighbor held judgment. Yet inside the small wooden home, something had shifted forever. Their silence was no longer heavy, it was full. When they worked side by side, when they shared meals, when they sat by the fire at night, their hearts carried what words still struggled to hold: love. But love alone would not keep the world away. One morning, a messenger arrived from her people. He was tall, cloaked in the symbols of her alien world, his face cold and unreadable. His voice was sharp as he delivered the decree. Your punishment has failed. You are to be taken back. The council has agreed. By dawn tomorrow, you will leave this place and return to face judgment. Her breath caught in her throat. Return to the very leaders who had sentenced her to harsher punishment for daring to live instead of break. She felt the walls closing in, but before despair could swallow her, he spoke. She is not going back. The messenger's eyes narrowed. Defiance will bring ruin to you both. Do not be foolish. She is not yours. She is not a possession. He answered firmly, stepping closer. She is my partner, and if you try to take her, you will not succeed. The messenger's gaze lingered, searching for weakness, but found none. With a sneer, he left, vowing to return with force. That night, she sat trembling by the fire. They will come. I cannot let you lose everything because of me. He turned to her, his voice steady. You are not the reason I will lose. You are the reason I finally have something worth fighting for. Tears filled her eyes. She reached for his hand, her voice breaking. Then if we must fight, we fight together. And fight they did. At dawn, the square filled again. This time, it was not whispers that carried through the air, but shouts, anger, fear, defiance. The messenger had returned, flanked by guards from both her people and the colony. The council stood at the center, their faces tense, struggling to control a storm that had grown beyond them. She and he walked into the square hand in hand. Gasps rippled through the crowd. What had once been rumor was now truth for all to see. The elder counselor raised his voice. This union is forbidden. She is a punishment, not a wife. But he did not falter. She was never a punishment. She is my choice, and I am hers. The messenger sneered. You insult her people. You insult your own. Will you throw away peace for this? She stepped forward, her voice clear, carrying across the restless crowd. There's no peace in chains. If my people wish to punish me for surviving, then so be it. But I will not bow to cruelty. Not here, not there. The square erupted in noise, shouts of outrage, cries of support, voices clashing. For the first time, others stepped forward. A farmer spoke. She has harmed no one. A woman called out. Why should kindness be rebellion? One by one, voices rose, defying the council's silence. The balance shifted. The council looked, shaken. The messenger's authority cracked under the weight of the people's defiance. In that moment, he pulled her close, raising their joined hands for all to see. If you take her, you take me. If you condemn her, condemn us both. But you cannot erase what is true. We are no longer master and slave. We are husband and wife. The words thundered across the square, and as if destiny itself had been waiting. The crowd roared, some clapped, some shouted, but many stood firm behind them, unwilling to let the council tear them apart. The messenger, seeing the tide had turned, spat on the ground. Then you are lost to us, both of you. With that, he turned and left, his threats heavy, but his power broken for now. The council, shaken, gave no further order. The people had spoken louder than them. Slowly, the square emptied, leaving only the two of them standing in the sunlight, hands still clasped, hearts still racing. She turned to him, her eyes wet with tears but shining with something brighter. Then fear. Did we truly win? He smiled faintly, weary but certain. We won enough. The rest we'll build together. That night, in the quiet of their home, she placed her hand against his chest, feeling the steady beat beneath. From punishment to love, she whispered, her voice trembling with awe. He wrapped his arms around her, his voice soft. No, from punishment to freedom, and from freedom to us. For the first time since she had been cast out by her people, she no longer felt broken, and for the first time since he had lost everything, he no longer felt alone. The whispers had grown too loud to ignore. By the time another month passed, the colony council called him to attend a meeting. He rarely went to such gatherings. preferring the quiet of his fields to the noise of politics. But when they summoned him, he knew it was because of her. She stood at the doorway as he left that morning, her hands clasped tight, her chest heavy with dread. Though he gave her a small reassuring nod, she could not shake the fear that this piece they had built together was about to be torn apart. The council chamber was modest, a circular room with stone walls and a long wooden table in the center. The council members, men and women, who thought themselves guardians of order, sat with grave expressions. One of them leaned forward. "You were given the alien girl as part of an agreement," the elder said. "She was meant to live in humility, a punishment visible to her people. Yet, rumors spread. They say you treat her as an equal. Some say, even more than that." He met their eyes calmly. "She works, she helps, she has harmed no one. What is the problem?" "The problem," another counselor snapped, "is that others see it. Children ask why the alien girl is not treated as a servant. Traders gossip that she walks beside you. This was never meant to happen. Punishment must look like punishment." Silence hung heavy. His jaw tightened. He wanted to shout that she was not a symbol, not an object to be used for their politics. But he knew anger would only harden their judgment. Finally, he said, "What happens inside my home is my choice. I will not mistreat her to satisfy appearances." The council murmured among themselves, their faces disapproving. One leaned back with a sigh. "Be careful. The line between kindness and rebellion is thin. Do not forget what she represents." He left with his fists clenched. Their warnings were clear. If he continued as he was, both of them might face consequences. When he returned home, she was waiting, her eyes searching his face. "What did they say?" He hesitated, then answered honestly, "They want me to remind you of your chains." Her lips trembled, though she forced herself to hold steady. "And will you?" He shook his head firmly. "Never." Something broke inside her then, but not in the way her people had intended. Tears filled her eyes, hot and unexpected, as she whispered, "Why do you fight for me, even when it costs you?" He looked at her, the firelight softening his worn features. "Because you are not a punishment to me. You are a chance." The words hung between them, heavier than anything spoken before. Her breath caught, her heart racing as though it wanted to leap out of her chest. For the first time, she let herself imagine what it might mean if this bond they were building was more than survival, more than circumstance. But just as hope flickered in her heart, shadows gathered outside. News spread quickly in the colony, and not everyone was willing to stay quiet. Traders who had once mocked now whispered of opportunities. Some saw her as a bargaining piece, a way to gain influence with her people. Others believed she should be returned, punished again more harshly for failing to look broken. One night, as she walked back from the well, she felt eyes on her. Rough voices muttered from the dark, words laced with threat. She quickened her steps, clutching the jar to her chest, until she reached the house and locked the door behind her. Her hands shook so violently that the water spilled across the floor. He found her sitting by the fire, her face pale. She didn't need to explain. He saw it in her trembling. Without a word, he placed a hand over hers. His grip was steady, grounding her, and in that moment she realized that no matter what storms gathered outside, she was not facing them alone. That night, she did not sleep in the corner as usual. Instead, when the silence grew too heavy, she moved closer to where he lay near the fire. She did not touch him nor speak, but she lay within reach, close enough to feel the warmth of his presence. He opened his eyes briefly, met hers in the flickering glow, and gave a small nod. No words were exchanged, but both understood the world outside might turn against them. But inside these walls, they had chosen each other. And so, as the colony's judgment sharpened and the threat of punishment grew, their hearts began to weave something stronger than fear. It was fragile, dangerous, and forbidden, but it was also real. The days after the council meeting grew heavy, like the air before a storm. He noticed how the neighbors no longer greeted him with nods. Their eyes carried judgment instead of respect. She felt it too, every time she stepped beyond the edge of the fields. The looks, the whispers, the quiet hostility, it pressed on her like a second set of chains. But inside the small wooden house, things were different. The silence that once separated them had now become comfort. She no longer sat at the far corner, During meals, instead, she shared the table with him. Sometimes she even spoke first, asking small questions about farming, about his past, about things she didn't understand about humans. He would answer in his steady way, his voice calm and unhurried, as if speaking to her was as natural as breathing. One night, while tending the fire, she found the courage to ask, "Why do they hate me so much, even when I've done nothing to them?" He looked into the flames for a long moment before answering. "Because you remind them of what they fear. To them, you are not a girl. You are a symbol. And symbols are easier to hate than people." She lowered her gaze, her voice barely a whisper. "And to you, what am I?" He turned then, meeting her eyes. His answer was simple, but it struck her to the core. "You are you." She had no words, only a racing heart and a warmth that spread through her chest like fire. But the world outside their fragile bond was not still. Tension rose. In the colony, one evening, while he was working in the far fields, strangers approached the house. She had never seen them before, men with rough faces, voices sharp with arrogance. They pounded on the door, their laughter carrying a cruel edge. "Open up, alien girl." One of them sneered. "We hear you're living too comfortably. Maybe you need reminding of what you are." Her heart pounded. She backed away from the door, her mind racing. The men rattled the handle, and she could hear the wood strain under their force. Fear surged through her, but so did defiance. She would not let them see her break. Before the door gave way, heavy footsteps thundered from the path. He appeared, his figure dark against the fading light, his voice cold as steel. "Leave, now." The men turned, sneering at him. "You protect her too much, farmer. Maybe you've forgotten she's not one of us." He stepped closer, his fists clenched. "She is under my roof. That makes her mine to protect. Touch this house again, and you'll regret it." For a tense moment, it seemed the men would fight, but seeing the determination in his eyes, they spat on the ground and retreated into the shadows, muttering threats as they went. When he entered the house, she was trembling, her back against the wall. His anger softened instantly. "Did they hurt you?" She shook her head, but her voice broke. "They would have, if you hadn't come." He stepped closer, his voice low, steady. "As long as I breathe, no one will harm you." Something inside her gave way then. Without thinking, she reached for him, her hands clutching his arm as if anchoring herself to safety. For a moment, he froze, surprised by the sudden closeness. Then, gently, he placed his hand over hers, his touch firm and reassuring. They stayed like that, the firelight flickering across their faces, their breaths mingling in the quiet. No words were spoken, but both knew what had changed. The bond was no longer hidden in silence or subtle gestures. It had been tested by fear, by danger, and it had proven itself real. That night, she did not retreat to her usual corner. She remained near him, her head resting against his shoulder as exhaustion pulled her into sleep. He stayed awake longer, watching the fire burn low, his heart heavier than ever. He knew the colony would not stop. The council would hear of this, and the strangers would return. Their bond, fragile and forbidden, was no longer safe in the shadows. But as he looked down at her sleeping face, peaceful for the first time since she had arrived, he made a silent vow. Whatever came, he would not let her be taken again. Not by her people, not by the council, not by anyone. The storm was coming, but they would face it together. The days turned into weeks, and with each passing morning, the house that once echoed with silence began to feel different. It wasn't loud, nor filled with laughter, but there was a quiet rhythm, like to distant melodies slowly finding harmony. She no longer counted the days of her punishment with bitterness. Instead, she found herself noticing the way the sun lit the fields, the way the fire crackled in the evenings, and the way his presence, once unwanted, now gave her a strange sense of safety. Still, she resisted the idea of belonging. Each time she caught herself growing comfortable, she reminded herself that she had been sent here as punishment. She was supposed to feel humiliated, to feel broken, yet the human man gave her no reason to see herself as less. That contradiction haunted her. One morning, while she was kneeling in the garden pulling weeds, she felt him approach. His footsteps were steady, slow, the kind of walk that meant he was thinking before speaking. She looked up, shading her eyes from the sun, and saw him carrying a small clay pot. Inside it was a green sprout, fragile but alive. "This one is new," he said simply, placing it beside her. She frowned. "Why give it to me?" "Because it needs care," he replied. "And so do you." The words struck her deeper than she expected. She turned away, hiding the sudden heat rising in her cheeks. She had never been spoken to like that. Not by her people, not by anyone. Her own world had punished her voice, silenced her defiance. But here this human farmer treated her as if her presence mattered. That night, she sat awake long after he had fallen asleep by the fire. She turned the words over in her mind, staring at the sprout resting by the window. For the first time since her punishment, she wondered if perhaps this exile was not the end of her story, but the beginning of another. The turning point came sooner than either expected. One evening, while he worked in the far fields, a sudden storm rolled over the colony. The wind howled, carrying with it dust and broken branches. She rushed outside to secure the animals and supplies, her heart pounding as the sky split with thunder in her panic. She did not notice the beam that came loose from the shed until it came crashing down. He arrived just in time. Throwing himself forward, he pulled her out of the way, the heavy wood grazing his shoulder instead of crushing her. She stumbled, trembling, as he fell to his knees from the weight of the impact. Why would you risk yourself for me?" she demanded, her voice breaking, her hands hovering above his wound. "Because," he winced, forcing himself to steady. "No one deserves to be left alone in the storm." Something inside her cracked at those words. She pressed cloth to his bleeding shoulder, tears stinging her eyes without her permission. She had never cried for anyone before, not even when her own people had sentenced her. Yet here she was, holding a human man who had shielded her with his own body, and the walls she had built around her heart began to crumble. She tended to him all night, refusing to rest. When he drifted in and out of sleep, she whispered things she had never spoken aloud, memories of her childhood, her dreams of freedom, her loneliness. She didn't know if he heard, but saying them out loud felt like a weight leaving her chest. By morning, his fever broke, and he opened his eyes to find her watching over him, their gazes locked, and for a moment, no words were needed. The bond had grown fragile but undeniable. In the days that followed, something changed between them. She laughed once, just once, when he slipped in the mud while working, and though she quickly hid her smile, he caught it. He began to speak to her more, sharing small pieces of his thoughts, and she responded with quiet honesty. It was as if the storm had washed away the last of the distance between them. But along with this closeness came fear. At night, when she lay awake, she wondered what it meant to feel this way. He was human, she was alien, and their worlds had clashed for centuries. To love him or even to admit she cared felt dangerous, almost impossible. And yet, when she watched him move through the fields, strong despite his wounds, or when he left small things for her like an extra blanket on cold nights, or fruit he saved from his harvest, she felt her heart pull toward him in ways she could not stop. For him, too, the change was clear. He had once believed his life would remain empty, marked only by loss. But now he found himself listening for her footsteps, watching for her smile, waiting for her voice. The loneliness that had once consumed him had begun to fade, replaced by something far more terrifying and far more beautiful: hope. Neither of them spoke the truth aloud. Not yet, but the silence between them had shifted. It was no longer a silence of strangers. It was the silence of two souls standing at the edge of something neither fully understood, but both longed for in secret. The storm had passed, but its echo remained in both their hearts. The house felt warmer now, not because of the fire, but because of something unspoken that had begun to live between them. She found herself moving differently through the rooms, her steps lighter, her hands lingering longer on the tasks she did for him. He noticed too, though he did not say it. Instead, he allowed the silence to carry their growing closeness, like a song with no words yet filled with meaning. One morning, she woke to find him already gone to the fields. She stepped outside, the cool breeze brushing against her skin, and watched him work. His movements were strong, steady, and though she knew he carried scars deeper than the ones on his skin, He faced the world each day with quiet determination. A strange warmth spread through her as she realized she admired him not out of obligation, but out of truth. Later that day, while she prepared food, he returned with a basket of fresh fruit. Without speaking, he handed her one, his rough hands brushing against her softer ones. She hesitated, then took it. That simple touch sent a ripple through her chest, a reminder that their lives were no longer separate, no longer defined by chains and punishment. But outside their little home, whispers were beginning to grow. The colony was small, and people noticed everything. Some of the neighbors muttered when they saw her walking beside him, carrying baskets or working in the garden. She caught their stares sharp, suspicious, sometimes mocking. To them, she was still a punishment, a symbol of submission from her people. To see her treated as anything else unsettled them. One evening, as she fetched water, a group of women from the colony passed by. Their voices carried cruelty wrapped in sweet tones. "So, the slave has learned to smile," one of them said loudly. "Careful," another added. "She might think she belongs here." The words cut deep, sharper than the cold night air. She lowered her head, clutching the water jar tighter. But inside her chest, shame and anger battled. When she returned home, he saw her trembling hands and the way her eyes avoided his. "What happened?" he asked softly. "Nothing," she whispered, but he knew better. He didn't press her. Instead, he took the jar from her hands, set it down, and said, "This house is yours as much as mine. Out there, they may not see it, but here, you belong." Her breath caught. She wanted to believe him, but the stares, the whispers, the cruel reminder of her punishment made her doubt. Still, the steadiness in his voice gave her strength. She nodded, silently vowing to hold on to the safety they had built together. The days that followed brought more challenges. Traders from other colonies arrived, bringing goods and gossip. Among them were men who looked at her differently, not with kindness, but with hunger. She felt their eyes linger on her, their voices dropping into crude tones when they thought she couldn't hear. It frightened her, but it also stirred something protective in him. One afternoon, while she sold produce at the market stall, a trader reached out and touched her wrist. Before she could pull back, the man appeared beside her, his hand firm as he shoved the stranger away. "She is not yours to touch," he said, his voice low but fierce. The trader sneered. "Not yours either. She's a punishment, nothing more." The words stung them both. She lowered her gaze, humiliated, but he stood tall, his jaw set. "Punishment or not, she is under my care. That is all you need to know." They walked home in silence, the weight of the encounter heavy between them. She felt torn, ashamed of being seen as nothing more than property, yet moved by the way he had defended her without hesitation. That night, as he sat by the fire, she finally spoke. "Why do you fight for me?" she asked softly. He looked at her, his eyes tired but steady. "Because no one should have to fight alone." Her heart clenched. She wanted to say more, to tell him how his words had begun to change her, how she no longer saw him as just a man bound to her fate, but as someone she needed more than she dared admit. But fear held her back. Instead, she sat closer to him, near enough that their shoulders almost touched. They didn't speak again, but the silence was no longer heavy. It was alive, carrying all the things they could not yet say. In that quiet room, with the fire crackling and the storm of gossip raging outside, they found comfort in each other's presence, and though neither spoke it aloud, both knew that something far stronger than punishment was binding them now, something fragile, dangerous, but impossibly real.